The locations of the divisions include the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon Chiefs of Staff, the U.S. Department of Justice, Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the Congressional Finance Committee, and more. Many of the divisions exempt from conflicts between elected officials and appointed officials were referred to elected representatives versus the embedded syndicate. The United States Department of Treasury, for instance, does not have significant turnover from one election to the next. In fact, when a new Treasury Secretary is to be appointed and approved, the syndicate message is to have in place someone with experience to avoid on-the-job training. Translate to mean a syndicate henchman to continue the nefarious inner works. Numerous scattered reports have come from deep within the power centers of the United States. A reaction has come against a steady stream of executive decrees, that's executive orders issued by President Obama. Now, this is interesting. The new sheriff in town from the east is taking charge with a team of international cops. Too many violations of the top have occurred. The claim that the United States is a beacon of freedom is much like Vladimir Lenin proclaiming a paradise for the proletariat in Russia. The U.S. leadership is in the process of being exposed. The ugly cannot, or rather the ugly rancid underbelly will be in view soon on the global stage. Well, I can only hope that is indeed going to be the case. Many quiet leaders are appalled at the course of events who sit in offices that never receive much spotlight but which harbor much power. Alright, so that's what Jim Willey had to say in his last public report, which, as I said, you can read in its entirety on financialsense.com. It's the issue of August the 2nd. Alright, so here we have another one. This is from today, and Zero Hedge, the website that I've recommended many times before. ZeroHedge.com. Previously we showed that when it comes to Wall Street's returns, the 8% market return benchmark that every first-year analyst finds in Ibson's, which presumably must be some kind of a textbook they read, is for naive amateurs, with corporate lobbying returning anywhere between 5,900% and 77,500%. The real money is to be made in the buying and selling of politics. Alright, so there you have it. Buying and selling of politicians is the most profitable enterprise engaged by the criminal bankers on Wall Street and in London and elsewhere. The other quote I wanted to say here is, this is a man by the name of Chris Hedges, and the quote comes from another website which I've recommended before also, called the what is it called? The Golden Truth. And it's a blog, truthingoldblogspot.com. And the man who runs this, who writes a frequent commentary and analysis, is known as Dave in Denver. Anyway, so he quotes this man called Chris Hedges from, I presume it's a book, days of destruction, days of revolt. And this is the quote: "We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy." Okay, so all that statements are true, but they're all symptoms. And what I wanted to do tonight is, with that preliminary introduction, is to discuss this business of setting up the threefold Commonwealth. Because I'm going to just say, well, we need to do it, we need to talk about it, we need to discuss it, it needs to be mapped out, it needs to be delineated, and I'm going to go into some details of what I think and I feel it should be, how it should be set up and in what fashion. Now, of course, it will become apparent during the course of the future episodes that implementing the threefold Commonwealth, it's also called the threefold social organism by Steiner, but I'm calling it a threefold Commonwealth because I like the word Commonwealth. It has a nice ring to it. And if you're going to say, where are we going to start? Okay, because we have to assume that we have the wherewithal. I mean, what I mean by the wherewithal, there are people, individual men and women, in all those agencies that Jim Willie talked about, who are constitutionalists, and it would seem to me that they are the best, shall we say, subjects to whom one can expose the concept of the threefold Commonwealth and have some reasonable, at least I would think, hope of getting a fair hearing. Because obviously the criminal syndicate doesn't like it, because as I mentioned last time, Hitler himself had become aware of the threefold Commonwealth and he didn't want anything to do with it. Now, obviously, the fact that I can say, well, yeah, there are people, individual men and women, who are in positions of grave responsibility in the public sphere, that is, government, who will step forward and re-establish the Constitution as the law of the land, and have the authority and the clout to so enforce such a move. Was definitely a step in the right direction. But the problem is the threefold Commonwealth is an impulse. It's a spiritual impulse that comes from the Archangel Michael and the wise progressive powers. And to try to think that we can go back to the old ways of doing things is simply not going to work. It's not going to work. Because this is a new impulse, radically different, has never existed before in the history of humanity. and was brought to our attention by Rudolf Steiner. And the point is that you cannot put new wine into old wineskins, as Christ is quoted as saying, because if you do, then either one of two things are going to happen, or both at the same time. Either the wineskins are going to burst and the wine is going to be spilt and lost, or the wine is going to be contained by the old wineskin and it's going to go rancid. So we have to have a new wineskin. Now the Constitution, as such, at least in my estimation, having read it, and it's not that hard to understand, it's pretty clear, is a very fine document. I believe it's one of the finest documents of the human history. You know, it's up there with the Magna Carta and the Code of Hammurabi, the Ten Commandments, whatever. But it was put into an old wineskin. That is the problem. So we need to build a new wineskin. And of course the Constitution necessarily is not written in stone. It can be modified and changed according to the changing times in which we live. But its fundamental tenets are, I would think, at least from my point of view, and my understanding of it, is pretty much universal, and you know, it's not an outdated document for the most part. And when you consider that the men and women who formulated the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, these people were doing so in order to flee the authoritarianism and ruthless mendacity of the British Crown. And they paid dearly for that, very dearly. They were true men and true women of honor and courage and integrity. And they did have backbone, very much so. They were persecuted after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, hounded down, murdered, had their property destroyed, had to go into hiding, a lot of them. So they sacrificed a great deal in order to bring about the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights as it unfolded over the course of time. And we need men and women who can follow in their footsteps. But they need to realize what I've just said, that the current setup, the political, two-party system, and the centralized nation state has got to go, has to go. So, in terms of, where do I begin in saying, okay, let's say assume, and this is a big assumption, I realize that, which, and I will make that clear over the course of the next, whenever.